Zit was banging around the transport repair shop, throwing down tools, discarding parts, and generally making an agitated din. He caught sight of Turl standing nearby, and he turned on him with an instant attack. "Are you at the bottom of this pay cut?" demanded Zit. Mildly, Turl said. "That would be in the accounting department, wouldn't it?" "Why is my pay being cut?" "It's not just your pay. It's also mine and everybody else's," said Turl. "I've got 3 times the work, no help, and half the pay. The planet is running at a loss, I'm told," said Turl. "And no bonuses," said Zit. Turl frowned. This was not the time or place for a favour. Leverage. He had no leverage at all these days. "Been a lot of machines blowing up around here lately," said Turl. Zit stood and looked at him. There was more than a hint of threat in that. One never knew about this Turl. "What do you want?" said Zit. "I'm working on a project that could solve all this," said Turl. "That could get our payback and our bonuses." Zit ignored that. When a security chief sounded like he was doing you favours, watch out. "What do you want?" said Zit. "If it's successful, we'd even get more pay and more bonuses." "Look, I'm busy. You can see these wrecks. I want the load of a small minecar, just a small puller," says Turl. Zit barked a sharp, sarcastic laugh. "That's none. That's a new one on me. Here's one. It blew up yesterday, down the transshipment area. Take that one." The small bladed vehicle had its whole canopy blown off, and the green bloodstains had dried on its panel. Its interior wiring was charred. "What I want is a small pulling truck," said Turl. "A simple one." Zit went back to throwing tools and parts around. A couple narrowly missed Turl. "Well? Have you got a requisition?" "Well, I thought so." He stopped looking at Turl. "You sure you haven't got anything to do with this pay cut?" "Why?" "Rumour around you were talking to the planet head." "That's just routine security." "Ha ha!" Zit attacked the wrecked bladed vehicle with a hammer to remove the remains of its pressure canopy. Turl walked away. Leverage. He had no leverage. In deep gloom, he stood in the hallway between the domes, lost in thought. He did have a solution of sorts, and there were signs of unrest. He made a sudden decision. A compound intercom was near to hand. He took hold of it and called Nymph. "Turl here, your planet ship. Could I have an appointment in about an hour? I have something to show you." "Thank you, your planet ship. For an hour." He hung up, pulled his face mask off a belt hook, donned it, and went outside. Soft snowflakes were drifting down. At the cage, he went straight over to the far end of the flexi rope and untied it. Johnny had been working at the instruction machine, and he watched Turl warily. Turl, coiling up the rope, did not fail to notice that the man-thing was now using the chair to sit in. A bit arrogant, but it was good news, really. The thing had one of its hides rigged to the bars to keep the snow off a sleeping place. There was another one tented over the machine and workplace. Turl yanked on the rope. "Come along," he said. "You promised I could build a fire. Are we going to go and get firewood?" asked Johnny. Turl yanked on the rope and forced Johnny to follow him. He went straight to the Ochinko offices and booted open the door. Johnny looked around the place with interest. They were not inside the domes. This was an air-filled place. Dust lay in a blanket and stirred as he walked through the interior. There were papers scattered about, even books. There were charts on the walls. Johnny saw that this was where the desk and chair had come from, for many just like them stood all about. Turl opened a locker and brought out a face mask and a bottle. He hauled Johnny close to him and slammed the mask over his face. Johnny batted it off. It was quite large. It was also full of dust. Johnny found a rag in the locker and he wiped the mask out. He examined the fastenings and discovered they were adjustable. Turl was rummaging around and finally came up with a small pump. He put a fresh power cartridge into the pump, connected it to the bottle, and began filling it with air. "What is this?" said Johnny. "Shut up, animal. If it's supposed to work like yours, why do you have different bottles?" Turl kept on pumping up the air bottle. Johnny threw down the mask and sat down against the locker door, looking the other way. The amber eyes slitted. More mutiny, thought Turl. Leverage, leverage. He didn't have any. All right, said Turl, disgusted. That is a Chinko air mask. Chinkos breathed air. You breathe air. You have to have it to go into the compound or you'll die. My bottles contain proper breathe gas, and the compound domes are filled with breathe gas, not air. Now, satisfied? You can't breathe air, said Johnny. Turl controlled himself. You can't breathe gas. Silos come from a proper planet that has proper breathe gas. You, animal, would die there. Put on that Chinko mask. Did the Chinkos have to wear these in the compound? I thought I told you. What were the Chinkos? Where are the Chinkos? Were, said Turl, thinking he was correcting the thing's grammar. He already spoke with an accent, high and squeaky too. Not a proper bass. It was irritating. They're not here anymore. Turl was about to tell him to shut up when a streak of sadism took over. No, they're not here anymore. The Chinkos are dead. The whole race of them. Dead. And you know why they're dead? Because they tried to have a strike, and they're dead. They refused to work and do as they were told. So now they are dead. Ah, said Johnny. It came together for him. One more piece of evidence that added up to the smoke on the belt buckle design. The Chinkos had been another race. They had worked long and hard for the silos. Their reward had been extermination. Exterminate! It bore out his estimate of the silo character. Is that American's character? Sorry, Jewish character. Johnny looked around at the shambles so the Chinkos had been killed for so long ago. This place had run to ruin. See this gauge, said Turl, pointing to the air bottle he had now filled. It registered 100 when the bottle is full. As it is used up, the needle goes down. When it gets as low as 5, you're in trouble and will run out of air. There's an hour of air in the bottle. Watch the gauge. Seems like there should be 2 bottles, and once you carry the pump, said Johnny. Turl looked at the air bottle and saw it had clamps for a second one as a mate, and there was a pocket for the pump. He had not bothered to look at it and the labels and directions for the bottle. Shut up, animal, said Turl. But he filled a second bottle anyway, joined it to the first, and put the pump in his slot between them. Roughly, he put the mask and rig back onto Johnny. Now hear me, animal. We are going inside the compound, and I am going to talk to a very important executive, his planetship himself. You are to speak not one word, and you are going to do exactly what you are told to do. Understand? Animal. Johnny looked at him through the Chinko faceplate. If you do not obey, all I have to do is pull off your face mask, a little bit loose, and you will go into convulsions. Turl didn't like the way he got looked at by those ice blue eyes. He yacked on the lead rope. Let's go, animal. Nymph was nervous. He looked at Turl uncertainly as the security chief entered. Mutiny? Said Nymph. Not yet, said Turl. What do you have there? Said Nymph. Turl yanked on the lead rope to pull Johnny from behind him. I wanted to show you a man thing, said Turl. Nymph sat forward on his desk and stared. A nearly naked, unfurred animal? 2 arms, 2 legs? Yes, there was fur on its head and lower face. Strange ice blue eyes. Don't let it pee on the floor, said Nymph. Look at his hand, said Turl. Manually adept. You sure there's no mutiny, said Nymph. The news was released this morning. I haven't heard any response from the 2 continents yet. The mine site's over there. They probably aren't very pleased, but no mutiny yet. If you just look at these hands. I'll watch your output carefully, said Nymph. They might try to cut that down. Won't mean anything. We're pretty short of personnel, said Turl. There are no maintenance mechanics left in transport. They've all been transferred to operations to up production. I'm told there's widespread unemployment on home planet. Maybe I should pull in more personnel. Turl sighed. Bumbling fool. With reduced pay and no bonuses, and this planet being as awful as it is, I shouldn't think you'd get any takers. Now, this animal here, if you look at his hands, yes, that's so, but I should have brought up some more personnel before we cut the pay. You sure there's no mutiny? Turl plunged ahead. Well, the best way to halt and have a mutiny is to promise upped production. And within a year, I think we can replace 50% of our outside machine and vehicle operators with these. Damn, he wasn't getting through. It hasn't peed on the floor, has it? Said Numph, leaning over to look. Really, that thing smells terrible. It's these untanned hides it wears. It doesn't have any proper clothing. Clothes? Would it wear clothing? Yes, I believe it would. Your planet ship. All it has right now is hides. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of requisitions here. He advanced to the desk and laid them there for signature. Leverage. He didn't have any leverage on this fool. I just had this place cleaned, said Numph. Now it have to be ventilated thoroughly. What are these things? He added, looking at the requisitions. You wanted a demonstration that this man-thing could operate machines. One of those is for general supplies, and the other is for a vehicle. They're marked urgent. Well, we have to raise hope fast if we want to avoid the mutiny. The mutiny? That's so, said Numph. He was reading the whole requisition form, even though he had seen thousands of them before. Johnny stood patiently. Every detail of the interior was being taken in. The breathe gas ports, the material of the dome, the strips that held it together. These silos didn't wear a mask inside, and for the first time he was seeing their faces. They were almost human faces, except they had bones for eyebrows, and eyelids and lips. They had amber orb eyes like those of the wolves. He was beginning to be able to read their emotions, as they related to their expressions. When they had come down from the compound halls, and they had passed several silos, these had all looked at him with curiosity, but they had looked at Turl with outright hostility. Apparently he had some special job or rank that wasn't very popular. But then all these relationships among these people were hostile, one to another. Numph eventually looked up. You really think one of these things could run a machine? You said you wanted a demonstration, said Turl. I have to have a vehicle to train it. Oh, then it isn't trained yet. So how do you know? Damn, thought Turl. This fool was worse than he had thought. But wait, there was something bothering Numph. There was something Numph was not talking about. The intuition of a security chief always sensed it. Leverage. If he couldn't do this now, he would have to do it later. Maybe he'd have leverage. He'd have to keep his eyes and ears open. It learned to operate an instruction machine very quickly, your planet ship. Instruction? Yes, it can read and write in its own language now, and can speak, read and write silo. No! Turl turned to Johnny. Greet his planet ship. Johnny fastened his eyes on Turl. He said nothing. Speak, said Turl loudly, and in an undertone added, You want that face mask ripped off? Johnny said, I think Turl wants you to sign a requisition so that I can be trained to operate a machine. If you ordered it, you should sign it. It was as though he had said nothing at all. Numph was looking out the window, thinking about something. Then his nostrils flared. That thing certainly stinks. It will be gone, said Turl, just as soon as I get the requisition signed. Yes, he dashed his initials on the forms. Turl took them quickly and started to leave. Numph leaned forward and looked. It didn't pee on the floor. Did it? Turl had had no sleep and 2 fights already today, and he was in no mood for a third. The snow was drifting down on a grey-white day, covering the half-wrecked small-bladed vehicle, deepening on the broad expanse beyond the zoo. The man-thing looked utterly ridiculous in a huge silo seat. Turl snorted. The first fight had been over the uniform requisition. The clothing shop foreman, a mangy half-wit named Druck, had maintained that the requisition was forged. He had even said that knowing Turl, He would not doubt it had been forged. And he had had the effrontery to verify it with an administrator. Then Drucker said he didn't have any uniforms that size, and he wasn't in the habit of outfitting midgets. And neither was the company. Cloth, yes, he had cloth, but it was executive cloth. Then the animal had spoken up and said that under no circumstances would it wear purple. Turl had battered it, but it had got up and said the same thing again. Leverage, damn not having leverage on this animal. But Turl had had an inspiration, and had gone out to the old Chinko quarters, and found a bale of blue stuff the Chinkos had once worn. The tailor said it was trash, but he could think of no more arguments. It had taken an hour to hack out and fuse together 2 uniforms. For the man thing, he didn't seem to mind too much. And then had refused to wear a regulation company buckle. The belt had almost fit, in fact. He almost collapsed, and he wouldn't touch it. Turl had had to go back to the Chinko quarters and dig around until he found what must have been some kind of old artifact, a small gold military buckle with an eagle and arrows on it. Well, at least that made an impression on the man thing. Its eyes had just about popped out of his little animal head. The second fight had been with Zit. First, Zit wouldn't talk at all. Then he finally condescended to look at the requisition. He pointed out that there were no requisition numbers in the blanks provided, and maintained that this authorized him to provide anything he cared of his own discretion. He said Turl could have that wrecked bladed vehicle. It was a write-off, but it still ran. That was what had brought on the actual blows. Turl had hit Zit hard, and they had gone around and around for almost 5 minutes. Blow, counterblow, blow, counterblow. Turl had finally tripped over a tool dolly and got himself kicked. He had taken the wrecked bladed vehicle. He had to walk beside it, running it, to get out through the garage atmosphere port. He now had the animal on top of it, and it looked like another fight. "What this green stuff all over the seat and floor?" said Johnny. The gently lifting for a keyboard that works. The gently lifting and falling snow was covering it, but it turned patches of the snow pale green as it dissolved. At first Turl wasn't going to answer. Then a sadistic streak got the better of him. "That's blood. It isn't red. Silent blood isn't red, it's real blood. And it's a proper colour, green. Now shut up, animal. I'm going to tell you how." "What's all this charred stuff around the edge of this great big circle?" said Johnny, pointing to the edges where the canopy had once been. Turl hit him. Johnny almost flew off the huge high seat where he'd been standing, but with some agility he caught hold of a roll bar and didn't fall. "I have to know," said Johnny. "How can I be sure somebody didn't press the wrong button and blow this thing up?" Turl sighed. The arms of the man thing weren't long enough to reach the controls, and he had to stand up on the floor plates to run it. They didn't push any wrong buttons, it just blew up. But how? Something must have made it blow up. Then he realized that this was a vehicle that had killed his silo down by the landing field. He himself had heard it explode. Johnny pushed away some of the snow and sat down on the seat and looked the other way. Spoiled little bitch. "All right," said Turl. "When these vehicles are run by silo operators, they have a transparent hood over them. That is needed for the breeze gas to stay in. You won't be using any canopy or any grease bath, animal, so it won't blow up." "Yes, but why did it blow up? I have to know if I'm going to run this thing." Turl sighed, long and shudderingly. Exasperation made his fangs grate. The animal was sitting there, looking the other way. Breeze gas was under the canopy. They were loading gold ore, and it must have had a trace of uranium in it. And there must have been a leak in the canopy or a crack in the breeze gas. When the breeze gas touched the uranium, it exploded. Uranium? Uranium. You're pronouncing it wrong. It's uranium. How do you say that in English? That was enough. "How the crap nebula should I know?" snapped Turl. Johnny carefully didn't smile. Uranium, uranium, he said to himself. It blows up breathe gas. And he had incidentally learned that Turl could not speak English. Which controls the which? Said Johnny. Turl was mollified a trifle. At least the animal wasn't looking the other way. This button stops it. Learn that button. Good. And if anything else goes wrong, push it. This bar turns it to the left. This one to the right. This lifts the front blade and this tilts it. The next one angles it. The red button backs it up. Johnny stood on the floor plates. He made the front brake, the front, I need more teeth, the front blade lift, tilt and angle, peering over the hood each time to see what was happening. Then he made the blade lift well up high. See that grove of trees over there? Said Turl. Start it toward them, dead slow. Turl walked beside the vehicle. Now stop it, Johnny did. Now back it up, Johnny did. Now go forward in a circle, Johnny did. Although Turl seemed to think this was a small vehicle, the seat was 15 feet off the ground. The blade was 20 feet wide, and when it started up, it shook not only itself, but the very ground. Such was its heavy power. Now start pushing snow, said Turl. Just a couple of inches from the top. It was very difficult at first getting the blade to bite in varying degrees, while the machine rode forward. Turl watched. It was cold, he had had no sleep, his fangs ached where Zit had landed a good one. He clambered up on the vehicle and took Johnny's rope and wrapped it around the roll bar, tying it at a distance where Johnny wouldn't be able to get to it. Johnny stopped the vehicle, ready for a breather. Why didn't none hear me speaking? Shut up, animal! But I have to know. Maybe my accent is too bad. Maybe you couldn't hear what I was saying. Your accent is awful, but that isn't the reason. You had a face mask on, and Numph is a bit deaf. This was a plain, outright security chief lie. Numph had been able to hear all right, but the animal's face mask had been muffled his speech a little bit. But Numph had been distracted by something else, something Turl didn't know. And the reason Turl had had no sleep was that he had spent the entire night rummaging through dispatches, records, and Numph's files, trying to get that bottom of this mystery, the leverage, the leverage. That is what Turl needed. He had found nothing of importance, nothing at all. But there was something there. Turl felt dead on his feet. He was going in for a nap. I have some reports to write, said Turl. You just keep this thing going around and practice with it. I'll be out soon. Turl took a button camera out of his pocket and stuck it onto the after roll bar. Out of the animal's reach, of course. Don't get any ideas. This vehicle only goes in a walk. And then it left. But the nap, aided by a heavy shot of Cabango, was a bit longer than he intended, and it was nearly dark when he came lumbering hurriedly back. He stopped. He stared. The practice field was all chewed up, but that wasn't the amazing thing. The animal had neatly knocked down half a dozen trees and pushed them all the way up the hill to the cage, where they were now all neatly stacked. More, he had used the blade to drop and slice up the trees into sections a few feet long, and then slit them. The animal was sitting on the seat now, hunkering down now to the keening wind that had sprung up. Turl used the rope. He untied it, and Johnny stood up. What's that all about? Said Turl, pointing at the chopped up trees. Firewood, said Johnny. Now that I'm untied, I will carry something to the cage. Firewood? Let's just say I'm tired of a diet of raw rat, my friend. That night, having eaten his first cooked food in months, and thawing the winter chill from his bones before the pleasant fire on the cage floor, Johnny heaved a sigh of relief. The new clothes were hung up on sticks to dry. He sat cross-legged, digging into his pouch. He drew out the gold metal disc, and then he reached for the gold belt buckle he had just acquired. He studied them. The bird with the arrows was essentially the same on each, and now he could read the squiggles. The disc said, "The United States of America." The belt buckle said, "The United States Air Force." So his people had long ago been a nation. and it had had a force of some devoted to the air. The sailors wore belt buckles that said they were members of the Intergalactic Mining Company, with a smile that would have frightened Turl had he seen it. Johnny supposed that he was at this minute a member, the only member, of the United States Air Force. He put the buckle down carefully under a piece of robe he had used for a pillow, and lay for a long time, looking at the dancing flames. The mighty planet Silo, king of the galaxies, basked beneath the forceful rays of triple suns. The courier stood to the side of intergalactic transshipment receipt area waiting. Above him, the mauve skies domed the purple hillsides of the horizon. All about him spread the smoke-spewing factories to paralyze the tense and crackling might of the company. Machines and vehicles boiled in purposeful turmoil throughout the multi-layered roads and the plains of the vast compound. In the distance lay the pyramidal shapes of the imperial city, spotted among the outlying hills were the compound's many other companies, factories that spewed out their products to whole galaxies. Who would be elsewhere, thought the courier. He sat astride his small Grango vehicle, momentarily idle in his daily rounds, waiting and waiting. Who would want to live and toil on some forgotten, light-gravity planet, wearing a mask, working under domes, driving pressurized vehicles, digging in alien soil, or drafted, fighting some war on territory nobody cared about anyway? Not this Silo, that was for sure. A shrieking whistle pierced the day, the warning signal to keep clear of the transshipment receipt platform, chasing away a fleet of blade, brush, and vacuum vehicles that were clearing it. The courier automatically checked his own proximity. Good. He was outside of the danger area. The network of lines and cables about the platform hummed. Then they shrieked into a crescendo that ended with a roaring explosion. Tons of ore materialized on the platform surface, teleported in an instant across the galaxies. The courier gazed through the momentarily ionized air. Look at that! The incoming ore had a crust of whitish substance overlaying it. The courier had seen it before from time to time. Somebody said it was called snow. Trickles of water took the place of the flakes. Imagine having to work and live on a crazy planet like that. The all-clear signal sounded, and the courier gunned his Grango vehicle forward to the new ore heap. The receipt foreman rumbled out to the new pile of ore. Look at that, said the courier. Snow! The receipt foreman had seen it all, knew it all, done it all, and held junior couriers in contempt. It's bauxite, not snow. It had some snow on it when it landed. The receipt foreman scrambled over to the right side of the pile and fished around. He brought up a small dispatch box. Standing upon the ore, he noted the box. He put the number down on his clipboard and then brought it over to the courier. Blade vehicles were charging in on the new pile. The receipt foreman impatiently handed the clipboard to the courier, who signed obediently. The box was thrown at him. He threw back the clipboard and caught the receipt foreman on his massive chest. The courier gunned his Grango and swiftly threaded his way through the incoming machines, speeding toward the Intergalactic Central Administration compound. CIA. A few minutes later, a clerk carrying the box walked into the office of Zafun, assistant to the Deputy Director for Secondary Uninhabited Planets. The office was little more than a cubicle, for space at Intergalactic Central housed 300,000 administrative personnel. Zafin was a young, ambitious executive. What's that box doing wet? The clerk, who was about to set it down among papers, hastily withdrew it, got out a cloth and dried it. He looked at the label. It's from Earth. Must be raining there. Typical, said Zafin. Where's that? The clerk tactfully hit a projector button, and a chart flared upon the wall. The clerk shifted to focus, peered, and then put a claw on a small dot. Zafin wasn't bothered to look. He had opened the dispatch box and was sorting the dispatches to another different department. Departments that were under him. Zipping an initial on those that required it. He was almost finished when he held up a dispatch that required some work and couldn't just be initialed. He looked at it with distaste. Green flashed urgent, says Zaffin. The clerk took it apologetically and read it. It's just a request for information. Too high a priority. He took it back. Here. We have 3 wars in progress and somebody from... Where? Earth, said the clerk. Who sent it? The clerk took the dispatch back and looked. A security chief, name, Turl. What's his record? The clerk put his talon on a button console, and the wall slot clattered and then spat out a folder. The clerk handed it over. Turl, says Zaffin. He frowned, thinking, haven't I heard that name before? The clerk took back the folder and looked at it. He requested a transfer about 5 months ago. Well, our time anyway. Still trap brain, says Zaffin. That's me. And he meant it. He took the folder back. Never forget a name. He leafed through the papers. Must be a dead, dull place, that Earth. And now a dispatch with wrong priority. The clerk took the folder back. Zaffin frowned. Well, where's the dispatch? On your desk, Your Honour. Zaffin looked at it. He wants to know what connection, zumph, numph. The clerk looked at the console and the screen flashed. Intergalactic Director, Earth. This Turl wants to know what connections he has with the main office, said Zaffin. The clerk pushed some more buttons, the screen flashed, and the clerk said, he's the uncle of Nipe, Assistant Director of Accounting for Secondary Planets. Well, write it on the dispatch and send it back. It's also marked confidential, said the clerk. Well, mark it confidential, said Zaffin. He sat back thinking. He turned his chair and looked out at the window at the distant city. The breeze was cool and pleasant. It dissipated some of his irritation. Zaffin turned back to his desk. Well, we won't discipline this, what was his name? Turl, said the clerk. Turl. Just put it in his record that he assigns too high priorities to nonsense. He's simply young and ambitious and doesn't know much about being an executive. We don't need a lot of excess and incorrect information and administration around here. You understand that? The clerk said he did, and backed out with the box and its contents. He wrote into Turl's record, assigns too high priorities to nonsense, young, ambitious, and unskilled as an executive. Ignore further communications. The clerk grinned wickedly in his own cubicle as he realized the description also fit Zaffin. He put the answer to Turl's dispatch on it, and in precise, clerkly calligraphy, and didn't even bother to file a copy. In a few days it would be teleported back to Earth. The mighty, imperious, and arrogant world of Silo hummed on. The day for the demonstration had arrived, and Turl went into a flurry of activity. Up early, he had again put the animal through its paces. He had made it drive the blade machine up and down, around and around. Turl had pushed it so hard that the machine had finally run out of fuel. Well, he could fix that. He went to see Zit. You don't have a requisition, said Zit. But it's just a fuel cartridge. I know, but I have to account for them. Turl grated his fangs. Leverage, it was all for leverage, and he didn't have anything at all on Zit. Suddenly Zit halted what he was doing. There was a flicker of a smile on his mouth bones. It made Turl suspicious. Tell you what I will do, said Zit. After all, you did give up 5 recon drones. I'll just check out that blade machine. Zit put on a face mask and Turl followed him outside. The animal was sitting on the machine, collared, the lead rope firmly fastened to a roll bar. It was kind of bluish and shivering in the bitter wind of late winter. Turl ignored it. The hood popped up as Zit released the catches. I'll just make sure it's all functional, he said, his voice muffled by his face mask, and further muffled because his head was in the mounts. Old machine, he said. It's a wreck machine, said Turl. Yeah, whatever. Zit was busily pushing on connections. But you got it, didn't you? The animal was watching everything Zit did. It was standing there right on top of the edge of the instrument panel looking down. You left the wire loose, said the animal. Yes, I did, said Zit. You talk? I think you heard me. Yes, I did hear you. And I also heard no proper polite phrases. Pah! Turtle snorted. It's just an animal. What do you mean, polite phrases? To a mechanic? Well, there, said Zit, ignoring Turtle. I think that'll be fine in there. He pulled out a power cartridge, shoved it into the casing, and screwed it on the cap. So you got to shove it in the hole and give it a good screw. And start it up. Turtle reached over and pushed the button, and the machine seemed to run all right. Zit turned it off for him. I understand you're giving some kind of demonstration today. I never seen no animal drive. Mind if I come out and watch? Turtle eyed him. He didn't have any leverage on Zit, and all this cooperation and the interest was out of character. He couldn't put a talon on anything wrong. Come ahead, he grunted. It'll take place here in about an hour. He would kick himself later, but right now he had a lot on his mind. Can I get warmed up? Said Johnny. Shut up, animal, said Turtle. He rushed off into the compound. Nervously, Turtle waited in the outer office of Nymph. One of the clerks had announced him, but there had been no invitation to enter. Finally, after 45 minutes, he scowled another clerk into announcing him. Again, and this time he was signalled to enter. Nymph had nothing on his desk but a saucepan of cabango. He was looking at the mountain view through the canopy wall. Turtle, scratching at his belt to make a small noise. Nymph eventually turned around and gave him an absent look. The demonstration you ordered can take place right away, said Turtle. Everything is all ready, your planet ship. Does this have a project number? Said Nymph. Turtle hastily made up a number. That Project 39A, your planet ship? I thought that had to do with new site recruitment. Turtle had saved himself by adding an A, which no projects had. That was probably 39. This is 39A. Substitution of personnel. Ah, yes, transferring more personnel from home. No, your planet ship. You remember the animal, of course? Recollection, recognition, remembrance, cut into New Month's fog. His brain slowly reminisced. Ah, yes, the animal. Did it pee? And he just sat there. Leverage, thought Turtle. He had no leverage on this old fool. He had combed the offices inside and out, could find none. The Home Office had merely said he was the uncle of Nipe, Assistant Director of Accounting for Secondary Planets. All this meant, apparently, was that he had his job by influence and was a known incompetent. At least that was all Turtle could make out of it. Obviously, Nymph was not going to stir. Turtle could see his plans crumbling. He would wind up just vaporizing that damned animal and forgetting it, and all for lack of leverage. Behind his impassive face, Turtle was thinking so hard sparks were flashing internally. I'm afraid, said Nymph, that hastily Turtle interrupted. Don't let him say it. Don't let him condemn me to another decade on this planet. The inspiration was on his lips in a miraculous bypass of his normal thinking. Have you heard from your nephew lately? He said. He meant it socially. He was about to add a lie that he had known Nipe in school, but the effect was out of proportion. Nymph jerked forward and looked at him closely. It was not much of a jerk, but it was enough. There was something there. Turtle said nothing. Nymph kept looking at him, seeming to wait. Was Nymph afraid? He had started to say so, but that was a figure of speech. There's no reason to be afraid of the animal, said Turtle smoothly, easily deliberating and misinterpreting things. It doesn't bite or scratch. Nymph just kept sitting there. But what was that in his eyes? You ordered the demonstration, and it is all ready, your planet ship. Yes, the demonstration. If you'll just get a mask out and come outside. Okay, yes, of course. The intergalactic head of the planet drank off the cabango in steady gulps, got up, and took his face mask off of the wall. He went into the hall and signalled some of his staff to put on their brief masks and follow, and then, with many slit-eyed darting glances at Turtle, he walked with him to the outside air. A mystified Turl was jubilant nevertheless. The old fellow was positively reeking with fear. The plan was going to come off. Johnny sat high on the blade machine. The aching cold wind blew puffs of snow, momentarily obscuring the compound. Johnny's attention was caught by the approaching crowd, the combined footfalls making the earth shake. The place chosen for the demonstration was a small plateau jutting out from the compound. It was a few thousand square feet in extent, but ended in a sharp-edged cliff that dropped more than 200 feet into a ravine. There was room to maneuver, one had to stay away from that edge. Turl came stomping towards him through the light snow. He stepped up onto the lower frame of the blade machine to put his huge face near Johnny's. "See that crowd?" says Turl. Johnny looked at them. They were gathered by the compound, as it was over to their left. "See this speaker?" said Turl. He jostled a speaking horn thing in his hand. He had used it before in the drilling. "See this blaster?" said Turl. And he patted the belt handgun he had buckled on. It was a huge thing. "If you do one wrong thing, or foul up in any way, I will gun you right off that rig. You'll be so very dead. Splattered dead." Turl reached up and made sure the leash was secure. He had wrapped it around the roll bar and welded the end to the rear bumper. It didn't leave much room for Johnny to move. His instructions had gone unheard by the small crowd. Now Turl approached them and turned, stood with his huge feet apart, seemed to swell, and yelled, "Start it up!" Johnny started it up. He felt uneasy. A sixth sense was biting him, like when you had a puma behind you that you hadn't seen. It wasn't Turl's threats. It was something else. He looked over to the crowd. "Raise the blade," roared Turl through the horn. Johnny did. "Lower the blade." Johnny did. "Roll it ahead." Johnny did. "Back it up." Johnny did. "Put it in a circle." Johnny did. That's how you confuse an Irish person. You know, you put them in a circle and tend to piss in a corner. Anyhow, now build a mound of snow from all angles. Johnny started maneuvering, handling the controls, taking light scrapes of snow, pushing them into a center. He was doing better than just making a mound. He was building a square-sided pile and leveling it off on top. He worked rapidly, backing up, pushing in more snow. The precisely geometric mound took shape. He had just one more run to make. Just one more run inwards. A run that would carry him forward and toward the cliff, just a few hundred feet away. Suddenly the controls did not respond. There had been a prolonged whirring whine in the guts of the control box, and every knob and lever on the control panel went slack. The blade machine yawed to the right, yawed to the left. Johnny hammered at the slack controls. Nothing bit. The blade abruptly rose in the air. The machine rumbled relentlessly toward and forwards and rose up onto the top of the pile, almost somersaulting over backwards. At the top, it slammed down flat, then almost did a forward flip as it went down the other side. It was rolling straight toward the cliff. Johnny punched the kill button time after time, but had no effect on the roaring engine. He fought the controls. They stayed slack. While he looked at the crowd, he got a fleeting impression of Zit off to the side. The brute had something in its paw. Johnny strained at the collar that held him to this deadly machine. He tugged at the flexi rope. It was unyielding as ever. The cliff edge was coming nearer. There was a manual blade control to his left, held by a hook. Johnny fought to get the hook loose. If he could drop the blade, it might stick and hold. The hook wouldn't let go. Johnny grabbed in his pocket for a fire flint and banged the flint against the hook. The hook let go. By its own weight, the scraper blade came down in a swooping arc and gouged into the rocky earth. The machine rocked and slowed. There was a small explosion under the hood, and an instant later, smoke shot up in the air, and a split second after that, a roaring tongue of flame rose. The cliff edge was only a few feet away. Johnny stared at it for an instant through the growing sheets of flame. The machine edged forward, buckling its scraper blade. Johnny whirled to the roll bar. He grabbed it behind him, the flexi rope wrapped around and around it, pressing the rope against the metal. He attacked it with the flint. He had tried it before with no success, but on the verge of being yanked in flames down 200 feet, hope was all he had left. His back was getting scorched. He turned the face front on. The instrument panel was beginning to glow red hot. The machine inched closer to the edge. Small explosions sounded as the instruments burst. The searing metal of the panel's upper edge was glowing with heat. Johnny grabbed what slack he had on the flexi rope and held it against the red-hot metal edge. The rope began to melt. It took all of his willpower to hold his hands there. The flexi rope dripped molten drops. The machine teetered. At any moment the blade was going to go over into vacant space, to shoot the machine into thin air. The flexi rope parted. Johnny went off the machine in a long dive and rolled. With a shuddering groan, the last support of the blade snapped. Flames geysered. Although shot from a catapult, the machine leaped into empty space. It struck far below on the slope, bounced, plunged to a stop, and was consumed in fire. Johnny pressed his burning hands into the cooling snow. Turl was looking for Zit. When the machine finally went over, Turl had looked around in sudden suspicion, but Zit wasn't there. The crowd had laughed, especially at the last part when the machine went up, and their laughter was like daggers in Turl's ears. Nymph just stood there, shaking his head. He seemed almost tearful. When he connected and commented to Turl, "Well, shows you what animals can do." Only then had he laughed, and they pee on the floor. They had drifted back to their offices, and Turl was now searching this transport compound. In the underground floors, he walked past rows and rows of out-of-use vehicles, battle planes, trucks, blade scrapers, yes, and ground cars, some of them quite posh. It had not struck him before how villainous was Zit pawing off of him of that old wreck of a Mark II. He searched fruitlessly for half an hour, and then decided to try the repair room again. Seething, he stomped into it and stared around. His earbones picked up a tiny whisper of metal on metal. He knew that sound. It was his safety slide being pulled back on a blaster. "Stand right there," said Zit. "Keep your paws well away from your belt gun." Turl turned. Zit had been standing just inside a darkened tool locker. Turl was boiling. "You installed a remote control when you fixed that motor. And why not? And a remote destruct charge as well." Turl was incredulous. "You admit it?" "No witnesses here. Your word, my word, means nothing." "But it was your own machine, written off plenty of machines." "But why did you do it?" "I thought it was pretty clever, actually." He stepped forward, holding the long-barreled blast gun in one hand. "But why?" "You let our pay and bonuses be cut. If you didn't, you let it be done. But look, if I could make animal operators, profits would come back." "That's your idea." "It's a good idea," snapped Turl. "All right, I'll be frank. You ever try to keep machines going without mechanics? Your animal operators would have just messed up equipment. One just did, didn't it?" "You messed that up," said Turl. "You realize that if this occurred and this went onto your report, you'd be out of work?" "It won't occur in my report. There are no witnesses. Nymph even saw me walk off before the thing went wild. He would never forward the report. Besides, they all thought it was funny." "Lots of things can be funny," said Turl. Zit motioned with the blaster barrel. "Why don't you just walk out of here and have a nice crap?" Leverage, thought Turl. He was fresh out of leverage. He left the garage. Johnny was a mound of misery in the cage. The monster had pitched him in there before going off. It was cold, but Johnny could not hold a flint in his hands to start a fire. His fingers were a mass of blisters. And somehow, right then, he just didn't want to have much to do with fire. His face was scorched, eyebrows and beard singed away. Some of his hair was gone. The Ochinka uniform cloth must have been fireproof. It had not ignited or melted, thus saving his body from burns. Blessed Chinkos, poor devils. With their polite phrases and brightlessness, they had yet been exterminated. That was one reason and one lesson to be learned. Anyone who befriended or sought to cooperate with the silos was doomed from the beginning. Turl had not made one motion in the direction of that burning vehicle to salvage him. Knowing he was tied to it, he did nothing. Compassion and decency were no part of the Silo character. Turl had even had a gun and could have shot the flexi rope in half. Johnny felt the ground rumble. The monster was in the cage. A boot toe turned him over. Slitted amber eyes appraised him. "You'll live," grunted Turl indifferently. "How long will it take for you to get well?" Johnny said nothing. He just looked up at Turl. "You're stupid," said Turl. "You don't know anything about remote controls." "Oh, what could I have done? Tied to the seat," said Johnny. "Zip, the bastard put a remote control under the hood. And a firebomb." "How was I supposed to know that?" "You should have inspected it." Johnny smiled thinly. "Tied to the cab." "You know now. When we do it again, there won't be an again," said Johnny. Turl loomed over him, looking down. "Not under these conditions," said Johnny. "Shut up, animal. Take off this collar, my neck is burned." Turl looked at the flayed flexi rope. He went out of the cage and came back with a small welding unit and a new coil of rope. It wasn't flexi rope. It was thinner and metallic. He burned off the old rope and welded the new one on, ignoring Johnny's efforts to twist away from the flame. He fixed the far end of the new rope into a loop and dropped it over a high cage bar, out of his reach. With Johnny's eyes burning holes in his back, Turl went out of the cage and locked the door. Johnny wrapped himself in the dirty fur of a robe and lay in sodden misery beneath the newly fallen snow.